Welcome to MTN Outdoors.
Sometimes I think we forget just how good we have it here in Montana. People come from all over the world to hunt our big game species. But if you're asking me, the one that's easiest to find is also the hardest to hunt with the bow and arrow.
At first glance, the wide open spaces that span our state can look as empty as the surface of the moon. But for the lucky archery hunters who have an antelope tag, that couldn't be further from the truth. Grab a good pair of binoculars, and their silhouette can betray them pretty quickly against the backdrop of barbed wire and prickly pear. Just because you can pick them out, though, don't start thinking you can easily pick them off. Getting close enough to make your archery tackle effective isn't a walk in the park.
Yeah, these guys are athletes.
Products of a different time, the current antelope evolved to survive alongside and hopefully just a little out in front of predators like the now extinct American cheetah.
Pronghorn can run at speeds easily over 35 miles an hour, and some reports have them going as fast as 60.
Speed is the least of a hunter's worries, though.
Their eyesight has been compared to be roughly the equivalent of a human looking through an 8-power binocular. Their eyes are set to the side of their head, and what that gives them is a wide range of view. They can see about 300 degrees around without having to turn their head.
And if you find those facts interesting, get ready to have your mind blown, because these animals are not even actual antelope. If this piece of information comes as a shock to you, don't feel too bad about it. You're not the first person to make that mistake.
Even the legal definition of this animal is that it's classified as an antelope. And the reason why people probably originally started calling it an antelope is if you compare it to some of the African antelope, they look very similar. They could easily be, transposed pretty easily just on their appearance alone. But they are a pronghorn. They're a different creature. The headgear that they have is not like a bighorn sheep. A bighorn sheep has a horn, and it is persistent. It stays there, it continues to grow for its entire length of its life. It's not like an antler. And so pronghorn are different in that they have a horn sheath, but they do shed it annually, and they regrow the sheath every year.
So speed and sight make hunting these very unique creatures during archery season an uphill battle, to say the least. But if you're looking for a challenge and willing to put in the miles, the pursuit can be rewarding.
A lot of people really don't have the opportunity to really connect with kind of the wildlife experience that you have when you're pursuing things at that time of the year.
Even if it ends with an empty freezer, which is more than likely.
One thing we know is that the proportion of hunters that are successful in actually harvesting an antelope really an awful lot lower for archers than it is for rifle hunters.
But you know what they say, it's called hunting, not getting.
Welcome to this week's episode of MTN Outdoors. I'm Andy Curtis, and we all know when we're recreating here in the great outdoors of Montana, you need to be prepared. That means if you're on the water, wear a life jacket. If you're out on the trails, bring bear spray. But what do you do if you're spending time in town or even your own home? Well, these next couple of stories show us that here in Montana, you can never really let your guard down.
We've all done it. The clock strikes midnight, your stomach starts grumbling, and all you can really think about is that chip bag up in the cupboard. But imagine your surprise if the culprit you came upon poking around in your kitchen wasn't a member of your family or even your species.
And pretty soon there'll be more of Montana for us all to enjoy. That's because the proposed Snowy Mountain Wildlife Management Area is close to becoming a reality.
In August, the Montana Fish and Wildlife Commission unanimously approved the purchase of a 5,600-acre property about 20 miles south of Lewistown.
Here at MTN Outdoors, we don't just focus on hunting and fishing stories. We also like to shine a light whenever we get an opportunity to on the men and women who make their living outdoors. And no job that takes place outside is more important than our farmers and ranchers. But unfortunately, this job that is vital to all of us comes with a very heavy price. MTN's Ryan Gamboa has more.
Mental health in America is no longer a crisis. It's a chronic systemic problem.
What are you doing here?
Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks says as grizzly bears expand their presence across Montana, it's important to have an updated plan to
And as it turns out, wildlife management doesn't end quite when you hit the concrete. I don't know if you've noticed this, but urban deer have made themselves quite comfortable in towns all across the state. And now Helena is doing something about it. Tom Buchanan has our story.
If you've taken a walk through the neighborhoods of Helena recently, you may have been joined by some unintended walking partners.
Elsewhere in the capital city, the tradition of decorating trees along some of our more popular hiking trails has really taken off in the past few years. But what started out as a fun thing to do with the family during the winter has quickly turned into a headache. There is a solution though, and for those answers, we'll send things back to Tom Buchanan.
In years past, the decoration of trees along the trails on Mount Ascension and Mount Helena have created a bit of a litter problem.
Welcome to MTN Outdoors.
Welcome everybody to a very special, spooktacular Halloween episode of MTN Outdoors. I'm your master of ceremonies, Andy Killer Curtis. And we have a lot of things that go bump in the night here in Montana, but they're not all as scary as you think. So in tonight's episode, we'll take a look at this animal that's gotten a pretty bad reputation as a bloodsucker, when in fact, it actually helps out here in Montana quite a bit. We'll also see how this icon of Halloween is now being used to teach Montana school kids about agriculture. But first, oh no. It's happening! Sorry about that. Where was I? Oh, yes, grizzly bears. They're the things of nightmares for backcountry hunters and campers. And this next story, well, it could have been ripped right from a Hollywood horror film. But as MTN's Howling Haley Monaco found out, this one does have a happy ending.
It's a grizzly bear attack survival that's drawn national attention. But what makes their story different is the friendship behind this band of brothers.
Let's face it, bats get a pretty bad rap. And Montana Wild in Helena is trying to change that by showing us that these creatures of the night are actually creatures of great importance that love hanging around Montana as much as we do.
All 15 species that live here in Montana are insectivores. So here in Montana, they are just hugely beneficial to agriculture. One little brown bat can eat 1,000 mosquito-sized insects an hour. So we're all very grateful for that, right?
Their work doesn't stop there. The roughly 1,300 species of bats all over the world are important pollinators and downright cool animals that need our help right now.
So bats are facing various challenges, habitat loss being a big one. Folks don't often realize they don't just roost in caves, they roost in old dead tree snags. So leaving snags up is one thing you can do to help bats. Many folks have probably heard white nose syndrome has reached Montana. This is a disease caused by a cold adapted fungus. It essentially attaches itself to bats, irritates them, keeps them up all winter, and then they aren't able to make it through hibernation because of that. So being aware as you're moving around, if you're popping into any caves or things like that, it is something that we can be spreading.
We can also stop spreading misinformation about these winged creatures, starting with their spooky association with, you know.
The kids always want to talk about vampire bats. We don't have any here in Montana. They're one of these species that are in scary movies and storybooks and sort of get a bad rap in general. It's found that less than 1% of bats in the wild actually have rabies. Now, of course, you still need to use extreme caution. If you are interacting with a bat, finding one in your yard, acting strangely, the chances that that bat has rabies is higher than a bat that's acting normally, flying around at night that you wouldn't interact with.
If you have any questions or just want to learn more about bats, October is the perfect time to do that. And Montana Wild is the perfect place. Pumpkins. Probably the most iconic symbol of fall and Halloween here in this country. But it turns out these bad boys can be used for more than just carving a jack-o'-lantern or inspiring spice for your latte. As MTN's ghoulish Ryan Gamboa recently found out, pumpkins are being used to teach Montana school kids about agriculture and bring our communities a little closer together.
Torgerson's in Great Falls donated over 2,000 pumpkins to students across central Montana.
This week's episode of MTN Outdoors, I am once again your guide, Andy Curtis. And Helena, Montana is one heck of a town. We have everything here. Interesting historical landmarks like the Guardian of the Gulch Fire Tower. A great downtown with breweries, restaurants, and shops. And some delicious garbage. If you're a black bear, that is. Bear sightings here in the capital city have really increased this fall. So in this week's episode, we'll talk with wildlife experts about why they think that is and what you can do about it. Here's a bit of a hint. They're here for a free meal. We'll also take a look at the rebounding populations of swift fox here in the States and head down to Yellowstone National Park, where crews are working tirelessly to rebuild and repair those roads, all while staring down the barrel of some actual snowfall. MTN's John Shear will start things off for us.
This is the new temporary road linking Mammoth and...
Well, that should just about do it for us here this week at MTN Outdoors. But before we go, I wanted to say thank you one more time to everyone who sent in a photo this week. We got a lot of great ones of all of you camping, hiking, hunting, fishing, just enjoying the great outdoors here in Montana. And after all, that's what this show is all about. So please keep them coming. Send them to my email address at andy.curtis@ktvh.com. And you could find yourself at the end of a future episode. So without further ado, bring the family into the room because it's time for this week's MTN Outdoors Brag Board. First photos this week come to us from Dee, and the sights, and from the looks of that bugle, eventual sounds of an archery elk season. Good luck this season, guys, and please send me a picture of that elk once you get him. Stephanie wrote me in this email saying, no luck yet, just gadgets and scenery. And Stephanie, I find myself in the same situation this fall. Thanks for the pictures. Please keep them coming. Up next, how about some nice big sky pictures from Keely Ashby? Thanks a lot for these, Keely. And this might be my favorite one. Mary Cole sent in this photo of two future successful fishermen. Very cool picture, Mary. Thank you. And staying on the banks of the river, here is Maddox, out fly fishing for the very first time with his grandma, Vicki Olson. Glad to see you passing on your love of the outdoors, Vicki, and thank you for the picture. And last but far from the least, thank you to Dwayne Nelson for all the great pictures you sent in this week. Here are just a few. I'll try to get the rest up in future shows. Real postcard stuff from Dwayne. Again, thank you to everyone who sent me in a picture. And if you haven't yet, what are you waiting for? Shoot it my way at andy.curtis@ktvh.com, and you could see it at the end of a future episode. Until next week, everyone, thanks for watching. Stay safe, and I'll see you out there.